This episode is brought to you by Progressive Insurance. Fiscally responsible, financial geniuses, monetary magicians. These are things people say about drivers who switch their car insurance to Progressive and save hundreds. Visit Progressive.com to see if you could save. Progressive Casualty Insurance Company and Affiliates. Potential savings will vary, not available in all states or situations.
It's The Other Side of Midnight with Frank Morano.
This is The Other Side of Midnight. I'm Frank Morano. For the last year or so, even before that, but especially over the course of the last year, I have gone out of my way to showcase every possible viewpoint on the Israeli-Palestinian situation, on the Israeli-Gaza war, and everything that's led to. The Israeli-Lebanon war, the Israeli-Iran war, broader implications for the Houthis in Yemen. And unfortunately, I really do feel oftentimes that it's futile to do these segments, because I'll do segments with pro-Israel people, I'll do segments with pro-Palestinian people, I'll do segments with the two of them together. And the feedback that I get from listeners so often is that nobody really ends up changing their mind. They only kind of dig in their heels even more and retreat back to talking points that they've heard from whatever media outlet that already supports their point of view. Well, maybe I'm a glutton for punishment, but I'm going to keep trying to have nuanced discussions and broader discussions about exactly what's going on in the Middle East. Somebody that's been very outspoken on this issue is Sarah Leah Whitson. She's an attorney and the executive director of Democracy for the Arab World Now, or DAWN, as it's called. Sarah, thanks so much for joining me on the radio. Appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.
So let's start with the basics. What exactly is DAWN? What do you guys do?
Sure. DAWN is an organization that seeks to promote human rights and democracy in the Middle East, and our primary focus is to reform U.S. foreign policy in the region, to end support for abusive, authoritarian, dictatorial, apartheid regimes.
All right. And, you know, the word apartheid is definitely one that immediately sets off alarms in the brains of a lot of pro-Israel listeners. So, you know, you and other critics have referred to Israel's policies as apartheid. Given the complexities and the fact that Palestinians in the West Bank aren't Israeli citizens but governed by the Palestinian Authority, and also given the fact that there are Arabs within Israel that are able to participate in civic life. Sarah, whenever I discuss these issues with pro-Israeli people or pro-Palestinian people, as I alluded to in my introduction, I almost feel like the listeners don't hear anything, because if you're a pro-Israeli person, and I'll have someone on that cites what's going on in terms of the civilian death toll, the number of journalists killed, the number of people displaced, things like that. Basically, the rejoinder to that is one of a few things. Well, you can't trust any of those numbers because they're from Hamas and that's propaganda. Or, well, that's what happens when Hamas uses innocent people as human shields and embeds militant weapons inside places like schools and hospitals. If we're going to root out terrorism, that's the only thing that can be done. I hear similar things from pro-Palestinian people when pro-Israel folks make their arguments. But respond to those issues if you can, Sarah. The issue of, can you trust the civilian casualty numbers that are coming from Hamas, and the fact that all of these civilian deaths are attributable to Hamas because of the way in which they wage war?
Sure. I mean, first I would make one broad point, which is I am not pro-Palestine. I am not anti-Israel. I am not pro-Israel and anti-Palestine. I'm pro-human rights and international law. my career for the past 30 years has been dedicated to upholding international law, international human rights law, international laws of war throughout the Middle East and North Africa. I've worked in wars in Libya, in Yemen, in Iran, in Iraq, throughout the region. And my judgment of whether or not there's compliance with international law doesn't depend on the identity of the perpetrator. So for a lot of pro-Israel people, the reason they support Israel is because they feel a personal ethnic, tribal, religious affinity to Israel, and they feel responsible for defending Israel. They're not actually arguing about the law. They're not actually arguing about the facts. They're just coming up with justifications and defenses for Israeli behavior. So my assessment, that wouldn't matter if Palestinians were the ones who were committing apartheid and occupation and war crimes and genocide. My assessment, my critical judgment has been and would be the same. I was critical of the Arabs in Saudi Arabia for their atrocities in Yemen. I was critical of the Bashar al-Assad Syrian government for their atrocities against the Syrian people. But you will never find someone who identifies as pro-Israel ever criticizing Israel, because that, for them, is forbidden. For them, it's a question of tribal religious loyalty. So I'm sorry, but I'm not really interested in those kinds of psychologically motivated points of view that seek to rebuff the law and rebuff the facts because of their personal identification with the perpetrator. Let's take that out of the equation. I'm not pro anything. I'm pro human rights. I'm pro civilian. Okay? So the facts are clear. And whether it's Hamas's health ministry, Hamas as the local governing body, has a health ministry, has hospitals, has doctors, nobody is disputing the lists of names of children, over 15,000 children who have died under Israeli bombs, okay? No one is seriously disputing that number. And I can tell you the official numbers from Hamas's Ministry of Health, which I think now is about 45,000 people, those are the actual recorded deaths where they have been able to verify this human body with this registered ID is now confirmed dead. That's their death count. I assure you, the actual death count in Gaza is far, far, far vaster. They haven't caught anybody under the rubble. They have not been recording as people who are being killed by the war, people who die because they succumb to their wounds 2 or 3 weeks later. They're not even in Hamas's count. If the Hamas count that people are complaining about, if we want to complain about it, it's an undercount. That's the reality. So let's just accept that there is no dispute that the vast majority of those who were killed are women and children, okay? Nobody's debating this. Nobody, except for people who refuse to believe any criticism of Israel. Those are the only people who are disputing those numbers. The U.S. government isn't disputing those numbers. Oxfam, CARE, Save the Children, UNICEF, every humanitarian organization in the world recognizes these numbers, right? So please, let's not, get into the sort of impossible situation of questioning the facts before our eyes. And I don't know if some pro-Israel people somehow feel, well, if they only killed 7,000 children and the 15,000 children killed is too high because actually the number is 7,000, therefore you feel better? Seriously? No, you don't feel better. Now, as for your second question about human shielding, which is the oft-repeated allegation that partisan pro-Israel people who are not interested in the facts, but are interested in only defending Israel, say, alongside the Israeli government. Here's the thing. Gaza is a densely populated area. Nearly every square inch of Gaza is populated by human beings because there are generations of refugees crammed in there. Now, here's the other thing. Urban warfare is not illegal. It's not illegal to fight to protect your city and town when it comes under attack and to fire back from a city and town when it's come under attack. International law's limitation on fighting from areas where civilians are present is very narrowly defined. It says, number one, that a party to a conflict, like the Israeli government, should avoid endangering civilians. Now, here are the magic words: to the extent feasible. And the reason those words are there is because international law, the laws of war, which are actually very permissive, recognize that a party to the conflict may want to have its forces, its weapons in a civilian area because that is the only feasible place to fight from. Now, that doesn't mean that Hamas may not have violated this prescription by unnecessarily endangering civilians because it might have been feasible for them to fire from areas where civilians were not present. But in that case, this is an offense that Israel is doubly, triply, quadruply guilty of, because look all over Israel. If you've spent time in Israel, guess what? You see Israeli soldiers everywhere. And every Israeli reservist is a member of the armed forces living in civilian areas. Look at where Israel has its military bases. Look at where the defense headquarters are in Israel. They're all in civilian areas. Okay, the fact that we have U.S. military forces adjacent to or near cities, this is something that you see in densely populated areas, and sometimes it's because it offers you a message. Now, the crime of human shielding is a different crime. It's a heinous crime, and international law is very clear that you may never deliberately use civilians to shield yourself from attack. Now, that is something where you actually have to show the hard evidence of someone forcibly, deliberately using a civilian to shield themselves from attack. Now, I have documented this crime many, many times. But you know who's committed this crime? Israel has committed this crime. I have documented Israel strapping Palestinians, physically strapping Palestinians to their tank in order to avoid their tank coming under fire. I have documented Israel using children to knock on the door of a suspected militant, a Palestinian child to knock on the door of a suspected militant in order for them to make a military break into that. That's civilian shielding. Go back and read the story that the New York Times published just last week, documenting instant after instant after instant of Israel deliberately, forcibly using Palestinians as human shields to shield their own invading forces from attack. That's human shielding.
Choosing a bottled Starbucks Frappuccino drink that's all flavor and just 100 calories? Easy. Choosing between creamy vanilla, double chocolate, and sea salt caramel flavors? A little harder. Try the delicious new Starbucks Frappuccino light drinks. Look for them wherever you buy groceries. Start with Starbucks coffee.
Last week was our first playoff game, and my plaque psoriasis was so itchy under all my gear. Sometimes just thinking about scratching could take me out of the moment. And then my doctor told me I could get clearer skin with a pill called Otezla.
Otezla apremilast is a prescription medicine used to treat adult patients with plaque psoriasis for whom phototherapy or systemic therapy is appropriate. Otezla can help you get clearer skin after just 4 months.
Okay, ready for the next game. Talking to my doctor about a pill was a total game changer.
Don't use Otezla if you're allergic to it. Get medical help right away if you have trouble breathing or swallowing, swelling of the face, lips, tongue, throat, or arms. Severe diarrhea, nausea or vomiting, depression, suicidal thoughts, or weight loss can happen. Tell your doctor if any of these occur and if you have a history of depression or suicidal thoughts. Live in the moment. Ask your doctor about Otezla. Call 1-844-4-OTEZLA or visit Otezla.com for prescribing info about cost, and more.
Kick off summer with Memorial Day savings at Lowe's. Right now, get 5 Scott's Naturescapes 1.5 cubic foot mulch bags for just $10. Plus, get up to 40% off select major appliances and save an extra $50 on every $500 you spend on select major appliances $396 or more. Lowe's, we help, you save. Valid through 5/28. Mulch offer excludes Alaska and Hawaii. Selection varies by location. While supplies last. See Lowe's.com for more details.
If folks are just tuning in, my guest is Sarah Leah Whitson. She's an attorney and the executive director of Democracy for the Arab World Now, or Dawn. Sarah, for a lot of people, the issue is very black and white, particularly in light of what happened on October 7th. Two-part question. One, what do you think the appropriate response from Israel would have been after October 7th and the immediate aftermath? And then in the present day, what do you think the appropriate and responsible thing to do would be to get the hostages out of Gaza?
Yeah. I guess, I would answer that with a question, and everybody who asks it, I respond with this question. What would have been the appropriate response of Palestinians living under military occupation and siege by Israel since 2006, unable to leave Gaza, unable to have people come into Gaza for nearly 20 years? What would have been the appropriate response for Palestinians on October 6th? What should they do to end their over 50-year military occupation since 1967?
But as a human rights advocate, you wouldn't think that a terrorist attack in which civilians are killed is the appropriate response, would you?
No. Let me just, whether or not it's an appropriate response is secondary to the main issue, which is it's a crime to target civilians. Mm-hmm. It's a crime to deliberately target civilians. That is an unacceptable crime that no military force, whether it's Hamas with, two sticks to rub together, running ahead and targeting civilians with two sticks, that's a crime, absolutely. But it's also a terrorist crime, if you want to use that label, to target civilians in Gaza the way Israel has been doing, multiple-fold. As many, many people have said, this war didn't start on October 7th. I happily, with full gusto, condemn any attack on civilians, including Hamas's attack on civilians on October 7th. Mind you, we don't have all of the evidence and information about what exactly transpired and what was planned and what resulted on October 7th. But if even one single civilian was targeted and killed, and they were, obviously, that is a condemnable action. Okay? That's the easy question. The harder question is, what should Palestinians do to gain freedom from military occupation and apartheid rule and now genocide? What should their strategy be? When Palestinians in Gaza marched nonviolently a few years ago at the Gaza border with signs asking to end the siege, to end their occupation, you know what Israeli defense forces did to them? They sniped them. They massacred them. Hundreds of Palestinian protesters at that Gaza border were gunned down and murdered. Thousands of Palestinians were shot by Israeli snipers in the knee, in the back, deliberately to handicap them for life. They clearly, peaceful nonviolence, not working. Not working.
So at this point, again, what would you do? Let's say you were the independent arbiter of the current dispute in order to get the hostages released from captivity.
I mean, there's a short-term answer and there's a long-term answer. For the immediate short-term answer, I think the only way that the hostages are going to be released is if there's a permanent ceasefire, Israel removes its military forces from Gaza. Hamas has repeatedly said that it is willing to release every last living hostage, as well as the remains of those who have died, those who've been killed, if Israel ends its war against the Palestinian people in Gaza. They also want to do prisoner exchange. They want the thousands of Palestinians that Israel is now effectively holding hostage in Israel to also be released. So typically hostages, like America's hostage swap with Russia most recently, it's a swap. You release it, we'll release our hostages. Hopefully that day of a ceasefire, the withdrawal of Israeli forces, and the exchange of hostages is imminent. That's the only way that's going to happen. But I'll tell you what, Israelis are never going to live in peace and security, and Palestinians certainly are not living in peace and security until the occupation of Palestinian territory ends. You cannot subjugate another set of human beings in perpetuity and not expect them to react violently, to react angrily, to react in very terrible ways. The only way that's going to end is if Israel's occupation ends. And here's the thing. The International Court of Justice has ordered Israel to end its military occupation of Palestinian territories. This is not, again, it's not my opinion. We have only one International Court of Justice in the world. Only one. This one International Court of Justice, whose sole job is to resolve disputes and enforce international law, has ordered Israel to end its occupation. But instead, what do we have? We have Israel taking more Palestinian territory, annexing more Palestinian land, making plans to build resorts on Palestinian territory, even in Gaza, on the graves of the children whom they've murdered. So no, there's no way for Israel to live like a normal country in the world so long as it continues this military occupation. You have your land. Let go of the Palestinian land. Enough already. But what are they doing? They're taking more and more land. They're annexing more and more land. They're pushing their own population into more and more Palestinian territory in the West Bank.
So, Sarah, before we run out of time, I have to ask you about this, and I hope you'll come back because I've enjoyed the discussion. You wrote a piece, I think it was back in January, essentially that a two-state solution and working toward it has failed, and that a real democracy in the Middle East, including Palestinians and Israelis, is the only solution. So you propose a blueprint plan that includes a unified civilian legal system and equal voting rights for all under Israeli rule. A lot of people are afraid that this could undermine Israel as a Jewish state. How do you address those concerns, and would Dawn support similar restructuring under Palestinian rule for non-Palestinians?
Yeah, so the blueprint, and thank you for bringing that up. I'm publishing a book with my co-author, Michael Overman. It's coming out next year, 2025, under University of California Press. We propose a blueprint to end the occupation and apartheid rule and transition Israel into a rights-respecting state. In a nutshell, and I haven't gotten my elevator pitch down pat yet, we propose a 3-year transitional government to dismantle apartheid and occupation, to allow for political participation between the river and the sea for Palestinians and Israelis alike, that culminates at the end of that 3-year transition process in a vote or a referendum where the people living between the river and the sea can decide whether they want to live in one state or two states, whether they want it to be binational, a confederation, whether they want to organize themselves like Switzerland, whether they want to separate completely like the Czech Republic and Slovakia. But our argument is those issues of governance are not the first issues we need to resolve. The first issues we need to resolve is to end the crimes of apartheid and occupation, right? We can't start building a new future or thinking about how we want to build a new house when the arsonist keeps burning down the house every day. Like, the first thing you got to do is stop the crime, right? If someone's going around murdering people, we're not going to talk about rehabilitating the murderer and bringing peace back in the community. First, you got to get the murderer to stop murdering, right? The crime is what's got to end. Apartheid and occupation's got to end. So as for a Jewish state, I don't believe and I don't support any state that is predicated on the supremacy or primacy of one community and one religion over other communities and other religions in the same community. I don't believe that Christians should have superior rights in the United States and Jews and Muslims should have second-class status. And that's why I oppose the laws in Israel that give primacy and superior rights to Jews and gives second-class rights to Christians and Muslims and Baha'is and other religious faiths in the country.
All right, Sarah, we're going to have to end it there. I appreciate the conversation. If people want to learn more about Dawn, they can go to your website, dawnmena, MENA.org, and there's a lot of information on there. Sarah Lee Whitson, I hope we can chat again.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you. If you want to comment on any portion of our conversation, you can give me a call, 646-720-0635. That's 646-720-0635. This is The Other Side of Midnight, straight ahead.